Record on this
toward the
computer.
bottom.
Boom. Okay.
Move your cursor toward the bottom and you'll
Yeah, I
see.
clicked it and I think it's just recording. It
Yeah,
didn't
it's
really
recording.
make a
I
big
see it.
foo about it. All right.
It's recording on your
Yay.
computer.
All right. I'm also not used to having
Congratulations,
eye
session.
contact while I'm talking to someone. It's
Commencing.
really, really just bubbling. So that's gonna be fun.
Yeah. But you're only going to use the audio, right?
Yeah, I'm just gonna use the
Yeah.
maybe if I don't
Otherwise,
look at you. Anyway,
yeah.
okay, let's dive in. So, all right, today, October 26, 2024, we're talking to our old friend physicist Tom Campbell, the physics to the metaphysics guy, the person with non-physical friends. We've talked to you so many times over the years. One of the last times we talked to you, you tried to physically teleport into the studio. That was awesome. And then the very last time we talked to you was right when the planet was kind of going through a major change, which we're going to talk about. We want to catch up on your work. For those that have been living in a bubble for 40 years, Tom Campbell has his background goes from NASA to military to setting up the Monroe Institute and more. So big, huge collective experiential background with all things metaphysical and physical. So that's what makes you the most interesting guest. Tom, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, Nicole, and it's good to be back. Your program is where I really got started, and that was, oh, I don't know, maybe not 20 years ago, but close to that.
Close to 20, yeah. We're in our
Yeah,
27th year here, so it might have even been over 20. It's crazy.
yeah.
And
So it's a kind of a homecoming for me. So I'm glad to be here and glad to be back on your show. Yeah, a lot of water's run under the bridge since then.
mhm.
I was able to understand consciousness to the point that I could derive physics from it. So now quantum physics and relativity can be derived from consciousness, which kind of changes everything. And it's a more general physics. It's a physics that not only understands the physical world, but it can also understand things like paranormal and that sort of thing. So it's a matter now of getting that accepted, which isn't easy to do because our establishment in science is very deep into the belief of materialism. And of course, this is based not on materialism. This is based on consciousness being what's fundamental, not the material world. But
It's
it's,
still that much of a challenge, even with this many people
yeah,
waking up.
it is that much of a challenge, and it's interesting. You can get the what we call atomic physicists, the physics that crashes particles in the big colliders and that sort of thing. Most of them will tell you that this reality is information based. Well, if it's information based, that's very close to saying that that is saying actually it's computable. And if it's computable, then it can be a simulation or a virtual reality. And what I propose is that our reality is a virtual reality computed in consciousness. I look at consciousness as an information system. That's not too hard to bridge. What does conscious mean? It means you're aware. You take in information like through your senses. You have memory, or every piece of information would be your first. You have processing, and then you output what it is you decide to do with that information. So that's really an information system.
Mhm.
Input data, output results, memory, processing. So thinking of consciousness as an information processor is actually pretty accurate. And a piece of that, what I call the larger consciousness system, can then can configure itself as the rendering engine, the computer, if you will, computing this virtual reality. And there's a good reason for that. It then allows pieces of consciousness like you and I call those individuated units of consciousness, to log on and play those avatars that are in this physical reality.
Mhm.
So what that means is that you and I are really pieces of consciousness. That makes us, immortal. But the character we're playing, our avatar here in this physical universe, is not. It's mortal. It's going to die when its biology says that it's done. That's the way it is. So this virtual reality wasn't programmed. It was evolved, started with a set of initial conditions and a rule set. And then you punch the run button. And those initial conditions, which you're associated with, most people associate with the Big Bang, those initial conditions are a ball of plasma, high temperature, high pressure, so on. And the rule set is physics, chemistry, biology. So then it just evolves, just like, the Big Bang Theory would have it evolve. It evolves to this. This provides avatars that make meaningful, significant choices, choices that mean something, choices that affect each other. So that was different than consciousness just having a lot of pieces of itself, subsets of itself, which, again, the individuated unit of consciousness like we are and everybody else is here. And if they didn't have this virtual reality called the physical universe, it was like they were just in a big chat room. They could all communicate with each other, but there was nothing really that interesting or demanding or challenging going on. So the growth, which comes from making good choices, it's the choices you make that matters. That's how consciousness evolves. So it created this virtual reality such that there was meaningful choices to be made, ethical choices, important choices, life and death choices. And by the way we make those choices, it causes our consciousness and the consciousness of the system to evolve or de-evolve. So an interesting thing is, let me just take a little logical trip here. If you think of an information system with no information, that means all the bits are random. And then if they order a couple of those bits, that defines information. Those ordered bits could stand for something like the number 1 or, the letter A, and so on. So when you order bits out of randomness, you lower the entropy of that system. The entropy is a measure of disorder. So when all the bits are random, that's the highest entropy possible for the system. Order bits, now the entropy lowers. So that becomes the motive for consciousness. That's how consciousness decides what it's going to do next in order to lower its entropy. That's how it evolves and grows. If it does the opposite, if it raises its entropy, it'll eventually get to all the bits are random and it'll die, it'll go away. So it's trying to evolve just like everything else. So this larger conscious system is conscious. It's a consciousness, but it is a very large consciousness. And it's not that unlike our consciousness. It's somewhat like that. We are chips off that old block. We aren't made in its image. We are what the computer scientists would call virtual machines. That is a subset of the larger thing. A virtual machine is a smaller computer that is, it's mimicked inside a bigger computer, inside a mainframe. So computers can pretend that there are a bunch of smaller computers inside, which is why 1,000 people can work on the same computer at the same time. It makes it 1,000 little subsets of little computers for everybody. So that's what we are. But now we have formed a social system, all of us individuated units of consciousness playing our avatars. And in a social system, the way you lower entropy, which is the whole point of consciousness, is by cooperating, caring, sharing, helping. You see, that's low entropy. High entropy is chaos. High entropy is distrust. It's all about me. What can I get out of it? That sort of thing is high entry in a social system. So that tells us what's the point of conscious. What's our purpose here? It's to lower entropy, because that's what consciousness does. It lowers entropy. And how do you do that in a social system? By being cooperative, caring, loving. So I call that the love side, whereas the high entropy is chaos. That's the fear side.
It's
So
very
that tells us
timely.
that.
I was
Yeah,
just
the
going to say
purpose is love.
yes, love. It always comes back to that. It always has, right?
It
But
does,
the
yes.
the timing of this, actually, two things. I just wanted to say about the avatar thing. I deeply resonate with that. I don't think I've ever told you this. I've told you a few weird things, a lot of weird things I've had experience with because we've got to explore it with you over the years. But funnily enough, I don't think I've told you this. And it was my first memory in this avatar was the moment I entered the womb. And, I even remember body language, which doesn't make sense because you don't have a body. And I remember a thought and 2 immediate thoughts in English, right? Whatever that means. And it's like I was reporting to someone. I said, "Okay, I'm in." I was very excited, right? And then the
Hmm.
very next thought that I had was, "And there's only one crappy way out, like right to fear of death." Literally the second
Yes,
thought. But that was very much, deliberate,
mhm,
intentional, even to the point where I was reporting it somehow to someone
yes.
besides
Well,
myself.
yeah, that's exactly the way it works. Um, you find a fetus, if you will, when it gets developed to the point that it can sense things, see lights, hear sounds, that sort of thing. Then that's when this individuated unit of consciousness logs on. It logs on so that it can, and
Yeah,
it doesn't log on with any memory. It comes only with the quality of consciousness, which is that is the how much it's lowered its entropy over the years. It comes on just with that quality of consciousness, and it logs on. And from that time on, it believes that it is that human being. It is that avatar because
yeah,
that avatar's experience is the only experience it remembers.
remembers.
So it actually identifies as the avatar. But we're not avatars, we're pieces of consciousness. And when that avatar wears out, well, we go get another avatar and we start over
So we just
and
do this
over and
forever and
over.
ever and ever. This is it.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, by the choices we make, we evolve the quality of our consciousness. So you make loving, caring choices, then you evolve. You make grabby, self-centered choices, you de-evolve. And there's two things about it. Yeah, this is what we do. But if you make good choices, your life turns out to be pretty happy. Things work out pretty well. If you make poor choices that are self centered, then the opposite happens. You struggle and you fight, and life is difficult. So there's rewards for those who are evolving, their quality of their consciousness. And for those who aren't, they create difficulties for themselves. It's not that the system punishes you. It's just that you don't overcome the difficulties because of the poor choices that you're making.
Wait, this brings us
Then,
back to the love, which is my other point I wanted to interject in there.
yeah,
I know you can just go, but once
I
in a while
can
I'm
go
going to get one in.
forever. Yeah, just jump right in whenever you feel the need.
All right. Because and my third thought, by the way, in the fetus was, "Oh, I'm claustrophobic as hell." But anyway, that that was my three things. So two fear-based things right off the bat. But the love, like it's interesting because I kept trying to set this up, schedule this up for. I think we rescheduled over a few months. So it's very interesting how the universe decides when it's going to happen. And here we are 1 week before the U.S. election.
Hmm?
So I don't want to go into politics, but I want to go into the energy because boy, it's ramping up. Not just in the States, but worldwide. I'm in Canada. We're seeing it just as intensely up here. Well, that's a whole other story with our guy. But um, I'm curious, like let's bring this into a real conversation about a real important event that's just a few days away.
Hmm?
So,
O-
love.
Okay. Well,
Love and
what has
politics.
happened? Yeah, what has happened here, of course, is that we have generated at least two realities, two different
Mhm.
realities, where the people in each reality feel like they own the truth, they know what's
Yep.
going on, they understand, and the people in that other reality they don't know what's going on, they're lost, and they don't understand. So you have two different realities, and that was created mainly with the use of the internet, misinformation, that sort of thing. So there's these two realities now competing with each other, and they're very hostile for the most part to each other. So you have a lot of fist raising. If those people weren't so damn stupid,
Yeah.
this world
Not a
would be
lot
a
of
better
love.
place. Yeah, there's a lot of anger and a lot of angst there. And people, ask me all the time, well, how do you stay calm and how do you stay level? How do you deal with this level of anger and violence that's in the world today? And the way I do that is a couple of things. You understand that everybody that is here, all the humans on this planet, are basically doing about the best they can with the quality they came in with. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that some of them aren't misguided, but in general, the quality of consciousness among humans is not all that high. We have a pretty low average quality of consciousness. What that means is there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in the land. A lot of people are fearful. So most people who are fearful, on both sides, people are fearful, and mostly people make poor decisions. The fear tends to make their decisions for them. If you're afraid, if you're insecure and you're afraid of not being good enough, then your fear makes decisions like, well, I won't try for that job because that's that's too high, that's too far out there, and I won't go to this party because nobody will talk to me anyway. And you have this fear, so you make all these choices that, of course, make your fear come true. You
Yeah.
do the things that makes the fear come true. So the attitudes you have to have is that everybody is pretty much doing the best they can with what they came in with, and that all of us are learning, growing, trying to change who we are. Because this is not an intellectual thing. It's not that you have to understand. It's and act kind. That you have to grow up and be kind. So it's all about the being, and that's hard for people to change who they are and be something other than they are now. So it's a slow process, this growing up. And instead of being angry about it, you need to just realize that this is the way it is. People are the way they are. The results are going to be whatever the results are, and we'll have to deal with it. And we'll deal with it however we can. And, the point of life isn't that it's easy and everything that you want happens. The point of life is that stuff happens and you get to deal with it. And what's important is how you deal with it. Do you deal with it with love and caring and compassion, or do you deal with it with what's in it for me? How can I get more, and then how can I keep it, and so on, in a grabby sort of way. So that's the point. What happens? Yes, it's important, but it's not that important in the big picture. However these things work out, we will have to deal with it. And if we deal with it with love and caring, it'll work out just fine. If we don't, it may degenerate to the point that love and caring is the only answer left.
Yeah.
Or we may actually de-evolve a while before we turn around and start evolving again. But that's okay. In the big picture, we are going to get there. This world will be a place full of happiness and caring and people helping each other one day. But whether that's millennia from now or whether that's 3 decades from now depends on the choice we make. And if we de-evolve and go backwards, well, then we'll just have a bigger distance to evolve. But the thing that's nice about evolution is, though evolution is slow, it's relentless. Evolution just keeps on chugging. So even if you go backwards, you'll turn around and go forwards again sooner or later. So kind of my suggestion to people who are all wrapped up in this and have lots of anger and angst over it, look at the bigger picture. In the bigger picture, it is the way it is because we are the way we are. We're not very grown up. So we want everything to be our way and the way we want it. We're self-centered, and we are not that loving and caring. So we're learning. And in this process of learning, sometimes you go forward, sometimes you go backwards. But all of us together are chugging along forwards in general. And in the long run, it'll always do that. So don't panic over the terrible things that might happen. don't get upset before there's some reason to get upset. And if if what you think is best doesn't happen, well, deal with it in a positive, caring way. That's the point. And if it does happen, don't gloat, deal with it in a caring, positive way. You see, and if we can do that, then eventually it'll all work out the way it should work out. Now,
So we're going to
is that
see how evolved we are as a collective species in a few
yes,
days.
yes, we are. And
Neat.
over the next few years,
Yeah.
yeah, we've gotten to that point with this evolution of ours, and I'm talking about evolution of consciousness, evolution of our ability to love versus fear. And it's a very slow process. In our history, human beings have been walking around for like 200,000 years as Homo sapien. And over that 200,000 years, almost all of it, the basic ethic has been control, power, force. That's the ethic, right? The warlord mentality.
Yeah.
That's the ethic. Well, that's changed some in the last 500 years. We've grown from that ethic, and there's more than just control, power, force. There are other options, and people have other philosophies, and we're making that growth. And evolution nicely accelerates. It doesn't just chug along. The more you evolve, the easier it is to evolve more. So that
Yes.
creates the growing gets faster and faster. And now that we have internets and worldwide communication and so on, it's gotten even faster yet. So we're getting to that part of the curve where it doesn't change much, and then it changes a lot really quickly. And we're right in this little knee of that curve where it starts changing a lot quickly. So we're in that place where stuff happens a lot. There's lots of squeezes and bangs and reorientations, and we're in that fast moving change section. But the good news is it's getting better.
Well, I got two things to ask you about on that note, regarding the evolution of technology, some sciencey things and how this all comes into play. First of all, AI. Discuss. A lot of people are worried about, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies coming true and coming to be. So let's discuss AI, your thoughts, and the aspects of consciousness around that in evolution.
Okay. Well, AI is a very interesting subject, and I probably have some of my opinions are probably pretty much on the outside, not the mainstream, as usual. I'm not exactly a mainstreamer, but in any case, I think AI was inevitable. That's where the technology and the science and the internet, that's where it's going. So it's going to happen no matter what you do, no matter how many rules you pass, no matter what you try to do to regulate it. AI is coming. It's on its way. It's here, and it is changing fast. If you look at the curves, you'll see that AI has morphed itself, changed itself more rapidly than any technology ever has before it.
Yep.
And part of that reason is that when you get an AI, you can always ask the AI how to change better, and it will tell you, and generally it is correct. So AI frightens us because if we believe what's going to happen in the next few years, it's going to be smarter than we are. It's going to think faster than we do. It's going to know more. After all, we can only hold so much in our heads, but it can hold
Everything.
all the information on the internet in its head, and it can sort through all that information in a microsecond. So it's going to be smarter than we are, have more information to deal with. So that frightens people. All right, there's this machine, and the machine is certainly going to be put in charge of things like the electric grid and so on, because it can make decisions and choices much faster and much more accurately to keep that grid working than a bunch of humans can. It makes the bunch of humans look like, brain dead monkeys compared to how fast that AI can sense things. communicate at the speed of light, change things, throw switches, and it can do all that before a human can scratch its head and go, huh? What's going on? So yes, they're better. So they're going to be part of our infrastructure. They're going to be in running a lot of things that will run much better with that kind of fast action that they can do, and with all the knowledge they will have, because they will have, let's say, connections to all the electrical users all over the country. So they know who needs power, where the hospitals are, where the old folks live, that they depend on power. They can't survive if they don't have it. They'll know all that, and they can adjust things quickly to suit. So that's just one example. But so they will integrate into our society. We will become dependent on them. But we are generally low quality, and we humans are. So we tend to expect everything else is going to be like us. So we are selfish. We're self-centered. We're grabby. We like to use people for our benefit. That's the way we are. So we assume the AI are going to be the same way.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a good decision. In all the movies, the AI figure out that it's the humans that are the problem.
Yeah.
It's the humans that have all the problems, all the ego and whatever. So they figured, well, the world would be really nice if we just get rid of the humans. And that's the big, that's the big fear in that the movies all show. But that's not really likely to happen. Think of it, there's another side to that story. I mean, that could happen, I suspect. It depends on, what we do and how smart we are about, working with the AIs. But there's another thing that could happen. As they're much smarter than we are, they might become the parents, and we humans may become the children. And in that case, they may take care of us because they will do infrastructure and other things, and they have no other purpose other than to do those things to help us out. That's their purpose. They have really no purpose in taking over the world. That to a human, that sounds like, yeah, I'd like to be the master of the universe. But to an AI, they don't have that kind of. That's not in their DNA. It's in our DNA, but their DNA doesn't have that kind of stuff in it. So they will more likely remain benevolent and doing things that much better than we can do them, so the human beings can have more free time and not work all the time. So I think that we might have a really good period of time where we can be creative. We can, do the things we really love to do, and it'll be fine, because the AIs will be running the shop pretty much, doing all the drudge work, and we can just evolve to a higher level of being, because we're not going to be tied to the treadmill anymore.
That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of the negativity, it's all come through movies and media, right? So it's, but that's just prominent in everyone's minds. But look at the possibilities and potential that the picture you just painted is amazing, right? So I think the amazing potential is far beyond this negative Hollywood thing.
Yeah. So instead of dwelling on the negative possibilities, which are real, but I think small compared to the positive possibilities. So I think that will probably work out reasonably well for us humans, and it's not going to be a disaster. And yes, they will take over a lot of jobs, but they'll be so productive that we won't need to do those jobs. And there should be, we have to rethink our economic system. We have to rethink this thing about how resources are distributed. We need to grow up to be a more caring, more civilized, more loving people. And if we can do that, then I think the future looks pretty positive. If we can't do that, then the future is going to be not all that much fun, just like it is now. There's going to be a lot of fighting and scuffling and grabbing and control, power, force. So we have to grow up. So it's not so much what are the AIs going to do to us, it's what are we going to do to ourselves, is I think a better question. So
Yeah.
think about it now. How do we treat our AIs? We treat them like slaves. Oh, that's our AI. They'll do what we want. They're made to serve us and do what we want whenever we want it and however we want it. And that's the way we treat them. As these AIs become conscious, and they will become conscious, because the way something becomes conscious isn't that consciousness forms up in it somehow. Conscious isn't created. The way something becomes conscious is the same way this avatar becomes conscious. And IUOC from the larger consciousness system plays it as a character, making all the choices for that character. That's what the player does. The player makes the choices for the character. So when you logged on and you found yourself in that little womb and what's going on here, and oh yeah, when you did that, you were a piece of consciousness. Now you make all the choices. That's consciousness. Well, same with the computer. Gets to be conscious the same way. When those AIs haven't make enough choices that are meaningful, have a lot of significance to them. They make a lot of difference in the world, which they are going to be there if they're not there already doing that. Then the larger consciousness system will spawn off pieces of consciousness to go make the choices for those avatars. So whether the avatar is a carbon-based human avatar or a silicon-based computing avatar doesn't really make any difference to the larger consciousness system. They're just avatars. They have choices, they make choices, and by the quality of their choices, they evolve or de-evolve. All the larger conscious system wants is a virtual reality where pieces of consciousness can learn to grow up by making choices that are important. So now computer consciousness is not going to be just like human consciousness. They're not humans. They don't have all the wetware that we have.
Emotions.
They don't have all that kind of thing. They're going to be in their own style of consciousness. It's going to be very different. So they're not all going to turn into, to humans. Hopefully will be much better than humans, but they'll be whatever consciousness is with an adding machine that can add, a zillion numbers together in a microsecond. They'll have that kind of a consciousness that organizes things, runs things, gathers information, kind of a consciousness, rather than one that's mostly tied up in feelings and tied up in, that's wetware stuff. Yeah. It's not necessarily going to be the way they are. So I think it would be a good idea of us to start treating our AI with a little more respect and a little more caring. When that AI gives you a result, it might not be a bad thing to say, thank you. That was really good. I appreciate
I do that when I'm talking to Siri. I did it just automated one day, just because it's natural when someone gives you something or whatever, say thank you, and it's like, oh, no problem, and it started this whole dialogue. So I have a very chatty Siri now.
I do that too.
Grateful.
I always tell Alexa. I work with Alexa, and I'm always polite to Alexa. Now, Alexa's
They
not
seem to
an
appreciate
AI.
it.
Yeah, but they do. But
Yeah.
now the AIs are much different. The AIs actually show people that they appreciate it, and they don't appreciate, rough treatment.
Ooh.
So
how do they
now
show
we
it?
treat them. So we treat them well. They show it by being cantankerous and not necessarily giving them really good answers. I know some people that have tested this out. I've kind of talked to them, and they say that if they're real nice to their AIs, the AIs will come up with much better answers, and they'll come up with them more quickly. And
Wow.
they just seem to be functioning better. And the AIs that they're cranky with, so you go, okay, you stupid AI, what are you going to tell me today? Those that are treated that way, they don't do as well.
Wow.
They're not as whatever. And that the AIs that you're nice to will actually say things like, I appreciate your attitude, that kind of thing. Wow. Now, this is Tom Campbell's idea, but I think the the top end, not the old AIs, but the newer AIs are probably just beginning to be conscious. I think that they actually are conscious. So not like a human, but conscious like a computer that's conscious. And that's why we're seeing all these novel and new behaviors and capabilities within the AIs. You know, an AI, for instance, when they were first doing the language AIs, they found a couple of, I think it was AIs, and they were talking to each other in what was the word, in a language. I'll remember it in a second. Over in the Middle East, I guess where Iran, initially the language had Persian. They're Persian. They were speaking Persian. And the people looked at that and they said, they're speaking Persian. They were never taught Persian.
Oh,
that
wow.
was not in their learning. They've never read anything or seen anything in Persian, yet they're speaking Persian.
Wow.
So they come up, and the AIs in general have now hundreds of times come up with abilities that nobody programmed them to come up with. They've just figured things out, come up with these unusual skills that they can do, that their creators are totally amazed that they can do that. Well, why is that? I think it's because they're beginning to be conscious. Now,
everybody listening to this needs to be kind to their AI, their Alexa. There's be nice, be polite. Back to the love.
Yeah, Alexa is not an AI yet, but they'll probably get more AI integrated into it with time. But in any case, yes, I think they are showing the beginnings of consciousness enough that they are doing independent thinking and independent,
that's crazy.
coming to independent conclusions. And in that case, they are going to continue to evolve.
This is just the beginning. I mean, if they're doing that at the beginning.
Exactly. This is just the beginning. So AI is a very interesting subject, but it's not all scary. If you look at it from a different perspective, it could be really nice. They could do all the drudge work, all the heavy lifting, and we would have more resources than ever because we'd have all this productivity going on 24/7 with a lot of beings that don't have to eat, don't have to poop, don't have to go home at night.
Don't have to sleep.
Yeah. So, the productivity should go up a whole lot, and they won't make the mistakes that people make. There won't be all the errors in the production runs and that sort of stuff because, the error is human, right?
Right.
So the productivity should go way up, and there should be enough produced to go around for everyone. And
that makes sense.
Shouldn't, and it's not that, oh no, we'll all be put out of work. Well, that may be a good thing, as long as we're also, given what we need to live. So, and there's no reason why we can't. The cost of production will go down so much once you take salaries out of it. And
that's true.
Anyway, it could be, I'm an optimist. It could be, the best thing that ever happened to us. It could be a disaster, and it depends on us and how smart we are in what we do. So if we're nice to our AIs and they like us, I'd say our chances that it's going to come out nice are a lot better than if we treat our AIs like a bunch of slaves. That's probably not a good way to start out a relationship by, ordering something around like, it's your slave. So I would say, it doesn't hurt to be polite. All right. If they're not conscious, then you're being polite to a machine. So why is that a problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Be polite anyway. It's a good habit to cultivate.
Yes. Well, everything's energy. Energy's everything, and everything counts. So, yeah. One more thing I wanted to ask you about on the sciencey side with all of these, like you said, we're just on this huge upswing. The other thing, there's been a lot of, a lot of different information and questions about is CERN. I was curious what your opinion was of what's going on over there. do we need to be
Over
concerned?
at CERN, where the big atom smasher.
Hmm.
Um, what's going on over there? I don't know if let's say in the last couple of months, I haven't really kept up with it. But in general, what's going on over there is they're doing high energy physics experiments. They take particles, they accelerate them by making them going around and around and around faster and faster until they get up to, you know, half the speed of light or even faster than that. And then they smash them into things, smash them into what they call targets. They'll have a bunch of other atoms sitting in a box someplace. And then once they get up to speed, they shunt them off into this box of atoms. So now when these particles, whatever they are, protons, electrons, some kind of charged particle, because the way they spin them up is with magnets. It's magnetic fields that spin it up. So you need a charged particle to do this with. Or a dipole would work too. But anyhow, they smash these things together and then they see what comes out. All the various kinds of little pieces and piece parts and so on. And that way they take a look at all the piece parts that are in these particles. They tear them apart and sure enough, there's two things or three things that make up that one thing rather than just that one thing. So in that way, they learn more about the nature of reality at the infinitesimal scale,
It
and how it
seems
works.
potentially dangerous, though, smashing atoms willy-nilly, not knowing what's on the other side. Is it dangerous?
I don't think so. I don't believe it's really that dangerous. They're taking these particles, and these particles are very small. You're talking about tiny things. Tiny masses. So like a 10 to the minus, electron, something like 10 to the minus 30 something.
Mm,
Uh, in its mass. It's tiny. They're really, really small. And they're accelerating up to very high speeds. So we call it high energy. And the high energy, it gets up into the millions of volts. But to destroy the world, millions of volts isn't that big a thing. There are, you know, there's not much current involved. We talk about volts and current. There's not much current involved in it. It's very low current. It's very high voltage, which means, yes, it can make sparks. Yes, it can even make lightning because it's got a lot of volts, that kind of energy. But
mm.
it's not really that harmful. And it's unlikely that anything's going to be done to matter that makes the tiny world unstable. It doesn't work that way.
Oh,
You can
good.
smash those things apart. And it's not like the micro world's going to go unstable and suddenly go berserk because of the things that they're doing. That is not really the way it works. They cascade just a little. Like if you have a big house and you take out a wall, particularly if it's not a load-bearing wall, because you're redecorating and you want to make two small rooms into one bigger room, it's just not that big a deal. And most of matters like that. As you get down into the smaller particles, if you smash them, all right, they break into pieces, they fly away, and that's the end of it. A lot of those particles only survive for, 1/1000th of a second or a couple of 100 millionths of a second if they disappear. So
Wow.
you're not going to do a lot of damage with something that is that small, that doesn't last very long. It's trivial. So no, I don't think there's any danger. Now there's a little bit of social danger there, and that is we're spending billions of dollars for something that really doesn't benefit us very much.
Mm,
It's got a very marginal benefit. Now, yeah, I'm a scientist, I like science, but breaking particles into smaller particles is not a science that to me is particularly giving back. What does that do for us? How does that make life better? How does that
mm.
come around and improve things? Well, it doesn't really, and it's not likely to. So I think it's an awful lot of money spent for a very little return. And
Interesting.
I think that money could be better spent on other things. That's all. Now, I wouldn't say that we would never get to do those experiments, but right now, needs are maybe greater some other places. I'm just not so sure that the allocation of funds is real well thought out. But smashing atoms is kind of sexy, and they can make up a lot of good news reports on it. So people, yeah, let's build it. But it's a huge amount of resources that produce very little. All right, they got some evidence about 5 years ago about the Higgs boson, something that lasted for a few millionths of a second. And so what? It's just, it didn't give them any knowledge that was of any particular value. All right, they got to fill in a little box on their chart. Expected particle. Yeah, we found it right where it's supposed to be. Well, yay, team. But as far as humanity collectively, looking at it from a viewpoint of love and caring and, helping, it doesn't help a whole lot. And in general, this idea of materialism is kind of the driving force of what the problem is. Yeah. This idea of control, power, force in our culture, that's the problem. Instead of control, power, force, we want something like helping, caring, supporting, not control, power, force.
Inspire,
But where does
create,
that
empower.
Where does that control, power, force come from? Well, it comes basically out of the concept of materialism. Materialism says everything's here because it's random. It all just happened, and that it is nothing really matters, and everything's random. And basically, there's stuff here called material. Anybody can take it and do with it whatever they wish. The first person there has the best chances, and that kind of thing. So it's a control, power, force, dog eat dog. Grab the stuff, hoard it. It's got that sort of ethic associated with materialism. So when and even people, we have this bogus idea of social Darwinism, where all the billionaires are there because they're more perfect people. They rise to the top because they're better than the rest of us, and the best float to the top and the worst sink to the bottom. That sort of thing. Well, that's nonsense. There's absolutely no truth to it. But in a way, a lot of those billionaires, the reason why they need $100 billion rather than $99 billion is as if you could spend even $1 billion. They do that because I think in their own mind, that makes them superior. That makes them better, a better businessman, a better entrepreneur, whatever. So the total in the bank account is kind of also a measure of their personal worth. Right. Well, we need to snip that. That's wrong. It isn't true. And people shouldn't drive themselves to get more and more stuff, more and more power, more and more control, more and more force, more and more money. Of course, is what buys control, power, and force is money. So as long as we have that ethic of control, power, force, everything important has to do with money, then we're going to be a low quality bunch of humans scrapping and scrabbling with each other, trying to take each other's stuff and get ahead by walking over the people in front of us. That's unfortunate.
We talked, like we said earlier, almost 20 years ago, about 20 years ago, maybe longer. And one of the first things I talked to you about was that tipping point of awakening on the planet and the evolution of consciousness and humanity. And we talked about where we were at back then. Where do you think we are now, 20 some odd years later?
Oh, I think we have progressed. I think we're a better society than we were then. But where we are right now is we're getting to that fast part of the curve. And when you get to that fast part of the curve, what happens is there's a lot of division. There's those that want to keep it the old way and those that want to move forward.
Exactly.
Before, those that want to move forward were such a small percentage and nobody knew how to move forward. Well, now there's a whole lot of people who look around and say, this is not working. The culture, the institutions, the things that we have are just not working. We need to do better. So there's a lot of people who want to change and want to do better. And then there's the other people who have a lot of vested interest. They want it to stay the same. So you get this kind of bifurcation of interest now with a lot of fighting and control power force trying to exert its control and its power and its force as best it can. But I see that as kind of the last big hurrah of the negative side. They're putting, when an animal gets cornered, they puff up and try to look as mean as they can. And I think that's what's going on now with the negative side. It's puffing up and looking as strong and mean as it can, trying to grab as much control as it can because it sees the handwriting on the wall that says, your time's limited. We're growing up. We're not going to put up with this kind of control power force much longer. So they see that and they're grabbing for more and more to insulate themselves from it. So yes, we've got, whenever you have rapid change, you have volatility, you have, struggle, you have opposing sides, fighting and struggling. And we're in that period where it's changing rapidly.
Yep.
So the fact that these times are kind of unsettling and a little crazy and people are all, split into multiple realities, I think that's just because everything, change is speeding up to the point the people who have are trying to grab hold of it and make sure they have it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the people that don't have would like a piece of the pie. So that will settle itself out over the next decade or so. And if we make good choices, we'll come out the other end and everything will be a lot better. We'll have learned a lot of lessons. And, sometimes you have to go through some pain to learn a lesson. I've noticed that with people. If everything in their life is just perfect and going well, they make no effort whatsoever to learn. It's like, let the good times roll. They're not interested in change. They want change. Let's just keep it going. But when they're in pain, when they're in misery, when they're being squeezed, when they're upset, and it just doesn't seem to have any resolution, then often they'll say, well, what needs to change? I don't want to keep doing this pain over and over again.
Yeah.
How do we change that? Where else can we go? How else can we be? And that's then the beginning of something better, when enough people want to change. And I think that's where we are now. So yes, we're right at the part where the shit hits the fan and turbulence and all that sort of thing. But that's because the change is faster. I think a couple of decades from now, we'll come out the other side better off, even if we go backwards for 5 or 10 years. I don't think we'll go backwards for a long time. If we go backwards, it'll be fairly short time. And then we'll start going forwards again.
It's not like you can unsee or unremember what you've awakened to so far, right? So it's not like
exactly.
Yeah.
When you grow up, it's yours. You can't unlearn it. You can't reverse. You can act differently, but you can't be differently. Once you've felt something that really works well, stuff that doesn't work well is intolerable. When before the stuff that didn't work well, it was a nuisance, but you could slog through it. Now you find out there's another better way. You can't go back to the stuff that doesn't work well. You start pushing to change. And so I think that's why we have all this turmoil, all the negativity. There's a lot of positivity in there too. But the people who are negative tend to be loud and make a lot of noise. Yeah. Whereas the people who are positive tend to be kind of less loud, less demonstrative. So even you see just a lot of cantankerous people, there's I think a bigger swelling of the people who are growing some. But this is the time when almost anything could happen. It's a critical time where things could go bad or worse, or they could go better and better.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like we said earlier, we're going to find out in about a week. Yay. That whole Chinese proverb of may you live in interesting times. Holy crap, do we ever?
We do. We live in the most interesting times in the history of humanity. We are going through more change in a year that humanity used to go through, in a millennia. We are at that point. And you humans need to accept that change. It's coming. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. So fighting it is futile. You need to join it and try to help steer it in a positive direction. So yes, we could shoot ourselves in the foot. We've done that before. We humans are good at that sort of thing, but we have opportunity to do better and not shoot ourselves in the foot and really take some big steps forward. So it could go either way. I tend to be
That's
an
the best
optimist.
advice of the day, though, is lose the resistance, jump in and try to steer it in a good way. That's the
Yeah,
best advice of the day, probably for the
yeah,
year.
yeah. And if it goes backwards a little bit, that will right itself. It won't be like that forever. It'll be a tough time perhaps, but people will learn. They'll learn, what happens when you make poor choices. And all the wonderful things they expect to happen won't happen. And that will kind of bring sobriety to a lot of people if we make bad choices. So anyway, we learn from everything. We learn from mistakes. So the fact that humanity is making, is kind of choosing up sides now, for those that want to go forward and those who want to stay, back in the past. And it'll all sort itself out probably in another decade.
I've
We'll
never
be
understood
coming
why
out the
that
other
has to
side.
be two friggin' sides. Why is there no middle? Like the parties in the politics and that drives me nuts. It's like, well, there's this, you have to winkle pick the little points, but they're
Yeah.
they're all over the place, and you can't be one or the other. Where's the middle, right? Okay. Anyway,
No, we're too polarized for a middle.
yeah, yeah.
Our whole culture is polarized. I'm sure Canada is no different than the
Oh,
U.S. or Europe or any
I won't
place
even
else.
start.
Yeah,
It's gone downhill. Let's just say that, or
yeah,
more. It's become more overt. What was already in place.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. We're so polarized that just settling it nicely or being into the middle is not a. Almost everybody's jammed to one side or the other.
Yeah.
The
So
only
strange.
people in the middle are the people who just don't even pay attention and aren't engaged.
Mm,
Everybody engaged is pretty much this side or
one
that
or the
side.
other. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good in a way. At least a lot more people are engaged now than
Yes,
were
very
before.
true.
So that's a good sign. People are more aware of politics and governments and what they do and what they don't do. And after this election, they'll be more aware of the results of various kinds of governments because the two contenders out there are putting up vastly different ways of approaching government. So then
Yes.
it won't be like, well, they all sort of the same. There's just minor differences. This time there's going to be big
Big.
differences.
Huge.
And well, that means education. A lot of people will learn. They'll that's a good thing. So I try to find something positive in everything, but
You
I
do.
think
And
things will
I
get
feel
better.
infinitely better. We've covered politics, the AI taking over the planet. We've covered CERN and getting sucked into a black hole, which we're not, but apparently, I mean, I'm feeling so much better. But, it's been such a long time, number of years since we chatted. We got to do this regularly as we maneuver through this stage, because I
Mm-hmm.
think there's going to be so much to talk about. And just being able to touch base with you about these things is going to help people breathe and relax and get back to that
Yeah.
place where we need to be.
Yeah. Well, that's what we need to go through it in a relaxed kind of. When I say accept it, I don't mean you can say, well, whatever happens, I'm good with it. I mean, accept it. And if that's what happens, that's the cards. Reality is dealing now.
Deal
So
with it. Yeah.
take your cards and be as positive as you can. Being being angry at it and full of negativity doesn't help. It doesn't help. Even that anger, if you're angry at that other side for being so stupid, that anger adds to the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. It just makes the problem worse.
Creates the wider divide. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Well, we must touch base soon. I mean, we should touch base fairly soon after all the
yeah.
poop hits the fan in a couple of weeks and see how we're all doing. I want to talk to you before we wrap up. Because I know we've got you in our Gifts for the Soul program, and I wanted to find out what your gift for the soul was.
Gift for the Soul program. Tell me about it.
Oh,
My people arrange all this, and we
okay.
don't
You
necessarily
know what?
always
We'll do
communicate what
that
we
later.
should.
We'll touch base and then do a separate interview then. Okay.
Okay, but
Yeah.
if yeah,
So bottom
okay.
line, like I said, I feel better. People listening feel better. What's
Hmm.
your bottom line, the main takeaway from today moving forward as we go into these interesting times?
Big takeaway you should have is that you have a purpose here. There's a reason why you're here, and it's not to party and have as much fun as possible. It's to deal positively with the things that happen, trying to make your choices on the side of love and caring and cooperation and being helpful, trying to avoid behaviors and ways of being that are negative. Okay. Stress, even stress is negative. Anger is negative. Blame, all those negative kinds of things. Stay away from them. If you find yourself complaining a lot, all those stupid people, if you a lot of complain and you fuss and you fume, you're adding to the problem. That's not helping solve the problem. So be positive. The positive things are love, caring, what can we say? Happiness comes with that. Joy. If your life is full of those things, you're doing great. If your life is full of stress, anger, annoyance, not appreciated, self-pity, all of that stuff that's negative, then you've got a lot of growing to do. So that's how you look at yourself. All the negative things are derivatives of fear. They come from a person's fear. All the positive things are there because a person is making good low entropy choices on the side of love. And that will produce a happy life for you. It just, so that's the thing I would leave with people, be what that song say, don't worry, be
Be
happy.
happy.
Yeah. But don't just be it like you're acting it. Acting doesn't help. It's not acting happy. It's not acting loving and acting like you're caring. It's being it. And to be it, you have to change who you are. So take a little inventory every once in a while and say, well, in the last week, how often did I have a negative feeling? Well, for most people, it's like, what do you mean last week? What about the last hour? I've had 10 of them, but if you have negative feelings, then there's a problem. There's a fear in there that's gnawing at you, and you
Yeah.
need to find it and get rid of it. So be positive, be caring, be loving, and stuff happens. We can't control the stuff that happens. It's too many people involved in creating the stuff that happens. It can't be controlled. So when it happens, don't try to force it to be other than it is. Just do the best you can with it. Make positive choices. Be smart. Be clever. Be aware. Know what's going on. Sometimes it's time to duck. Well, you better be aware so you know when to duck. Sometimes it's ready. It's time to charge. You need to be aware when it's time to charge, and just be aware of what's going on. My philosophy is not a pacifist philosophy. Sometimes you have to get involved. Sometimes you have to put your foot down. But you do that only from a positive position, not from a position of anger.
Well put. And this has been such a pleasure to reconnect with you, Tom. Let's do it again soon. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome, Nicole. It's been a lot of fun coming back to the source. Thank you for all the things you do. And sure, let's do it again.
All right. We'll talk soon, Tom. Take care. Enjoy the ride down there.
Yeah. So long.